All right. All right. We are getting ready to go live. So first and foremost, I just want to say thanks for everyone for tuning in. I have the honor and privilege to speaking with the one and only Dan Simerman from the IOTA Foundation. He's the head of financial relations, and we're gonna have a little time to kind of pick his brain and just kind of talk about the IOTA project. So I'm gonna get ready to bring him on. So Dan, I want to welcome you on and just say once again thanks for coming on the show and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Mike, thank you for having me. Appreciate it. I haven't done an interview in a while. Yeah, no, it's quite exciting times, right? IOTA's seen quite a bit of a transformation in the last couple months. We've kind of taken a step back and really wanted to focus and build and deliver. And I think that's why kind of you're starting to hear this thing like IOTA's becoming, or not IOTA's becoming, but like the sleeping giant is awakening. And I think that's a really interesting kind of like visual. It kind of does feel like that. It kind of does feel like, people don't realize the scale and the scope of what we're trying to accomplish, what our vision is, and really kind of what our goals are. So it's really great to have a conversation with you and kind of share who IOTA is, what we've been up to, and what we're building, and kind of what our reason for existence is. I think in this climate, it's really important to explain to the world what your reason for existence is. I think anyone can just copy, Ethereum or copy Bitcoin and say that they're a unique project, but IOTA really is unique in as literal of a sense as you can get.
Absolutely. And one thing for sure that intrigued me about IOTA was the Tango protocol. And one thing that I really didn't understand was that every, blockchain, all blockchains are distributed ledger technologies, but not all distributed ledger technologies are blockchains. And so that's what intrigued me a lot. Can you kind of break that down a little bit for us, Dan? Kind of like the Tango protocol and how it works on a DAG, and it doesn't have like the checks and blocks that a normal blockchain has.
Yeah, so I'm not the most technical person, but what I can tell you at a really high level is that in 2015, the founders of IOTA realized that in order for blockchain to break out of kind of the crypto world, you kind of had to build a whole new architecture. And I'm actually just on the phone with 𝗪𝗓𝗪𝗏, who wrote the original IOTA white paper. And he made a really good point that it was difficult to try to incentivize people to send and engage in a network without there being fees. So at its most like basic level, if you were like just visualizing IOTA, think of it as anyone can be a node, right? So anyone can spin up a node and anyone can participate. And in order to participate, you just have to participate in the network. So you have to verify a transaction in order to be able to send a transaction. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's it, like at a very high level. So what does that mean? That means that you don't have the scalability bottlenecks that come with a traditional blockchain. And 99.9% of all blockchains are the same, like relatively the same, right? They've got one block and there's another block and another block and another block. Yeah. And so that's kind of why we like to say that many of the other solutions out there are kind of like faster horses, right? Like we're kind of at a point now where if we want to break out of the crypto world, you have to build a car, right, or a rocket ship. So what IOTA is at its most fundamental level is that it's an entirely new way for distributed ledger technology to be disseminated and for transactions to scale, so they can be faster. It can be more decentralized over time, and the number of transactions that can happen, like transaction volume, can increase as the network grows, as opposed to other blockchains where once you hit like a transaction limit because of the block size or the block width, then you kind of run into these scalability issues that we're seeing on Ethereum and we're seeing with other protocols.
Awesome. And so the mainnet for IOTA launched in 2015, correct?
That's right.
And so they've been going through different phases, 1.0, 1.5, and now 2.0. And so can you kind of explain kind of the process of kind of how that's been going for IOTA?
Yeah, so this is again, I'm going to make it really, really simple. So
Yeah.
1.5 was about becoming production ready. So we had such a big vision for what IOTA was going to be, and we packed a lot in there in the first version. And
Okay.
while what we packed in there was very ahead of its time, it actually got to a point that it was starting to inhibit some adoption from partners. So like we had a very unique signature scheme called Watts, and we were quantum robust. So we had single addresses. So every time you spun up an address, I'm sure you've seen, it asks that you create a new address.
Yeah.
So very unique, but actually started creating friction points around adoption. So with 1.5, what we did, what we're doing, we're releasing it in the next couple of weeks, is we removed some of those friction points. So we have a new signature scheme called EDDSA, which allows us to get onto more custody platforms and more exchanges. People might have seen the announcement with Curve that we're going to be implemented on Curve. That's because of these technical updates. So we really listened to the market, we listened to our corporate partners, and we realized that we had to just make it a little simpler so that it could be adopted a little easier for our corporate and our institutional partners. The 2.0 is really about being fully decentralized. So we are updating the protocol. 1.5 is one of the biggest updates we've ever done. And simultaneously, it's kind of like think about it in parallel, we're also taking the work that we've been doing with 2.0, applying it to 1.5, taking what we've been doing with 1.5, applying it to 2.0, so that we can be fully decentralized. And that's kind of the way to look at it. I think some people saw with Cardano recently that they were kind of flouting how they were, not flouting, sharing how they were becoming fully decentralized. And every protocol usually has their own variation of it. Some might be technically decentralized, some might be economically decentralized, and that has implications on the security of the network. So there's many different ways that you can go through that journey.
Awesome. Thanks for breaking that down. Definitely, well said, better than I could have said it. And so, I do have definitely quite a few questions from the community, but before we dive into that, Dan, is there anything that kind of you would like to let the viewers know, or the IOTA community and specifically, about what's coming, or any particular partnerships that you can mention?
Yeah, no, like I can't really share. But I think you can point and see a lot of the, I don't want to say like clues, but like you can see what's happening, right? Like with the Curve update. So with Curve, part of the work that I've been doing is really building out a lot of our network here in North America. We've been primarily focused in Europe, and we've done such incredible work there on the corporate side that we just didn't have the bandwidth to focus on some of the other areas, like getting on custody platforms, focusing on how we can make the IOTA token more accessible, more open for people. So with these updates like EDSA, now it's unlocking all of these opportunities in the background. And I think we're also seeing some corporate stuff as well. I think another really interesting conversation, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds of it, but with this new update, we are focusing on, we're introducing a new concept called mana, which is kind of like spectrum or bandwidth, if you're familiar with the concept of like bandwidth on a digital infrastructure network. So what I kind of have a theory that's what's going to start happening is that, similar to how you're seeing, the Elon Musks and the Teslas of the world buying Bitcoin, I think you're going to start to see corporations buying IOTA for industrial use cases, and kind of because they've got real IoT networks, because they're working on things related to I don't know, data security, data provenance. They will want to own a piece of this network and kind of be part of this new like industrial revolution that's happening. And up until now, you've never really been able to do that as a participant. You or I could own a part of the, like the future when it comes to automation, when it comes to like machine economy, when it comes to kind of the future of data.
For sure. And so, and when you say supply chain, will that kind of go hand in hand with part of the focus of the Internet of Things that IOTA is kind of looking towards, if you know what I mean. So some of the industries they're kind of going for is like mobility, supply chain management, smart cities, and identity. So would that kind of coincide with that as well?
Absolutely. And this is something that I stress every time I get to have the pleasure of having a conversation with someone like yourself. That one of the biggest differentiators between IOTA and any other protocol is that we're feeless, and people misunderstand what that means. We're not saying that it might not cost, right? Like, it might cost a little something like on the energy level, right? For a device to handle the transaction, there might be an energy cost there, right? It's like the law of thermodynamics or something. But there's no monetary fee to send data. And the reason that that's really important is that there's this kind of there's a miscommunication happening that a lot of the IOTA competitors are trying to do, is to say we're the next internet. I'm sure you've seen this, right? Like a lot of our protocols are like, we're the decentralized internet. The problem is that like you or I are not going to leave, Instagram or what is it, Snapchat for a decentralized version that you have to have a wallet and you have to, hold a currency in it, and you have to, click a link every time you want to send data. And the reason, and you can abstract it away, but it doesn't matter how much you abstract it away. Even like the mistake that our competitors make when they try to compare themselves to IOTA is that they say we're almost feeless, right? It only costs half a penny. It only costs a fraction of a penny. The problem isn't a function of cost. It's that if you have to send value with data, if you're forced to, you've just blocked off millions of use cases. And I'm telling you, I talk with corporate partners all the time, and it's one of the biggest concerns. No one talks about it. And that's why we've seen such adoption with groups like Zebra and Jaguar Land Rover, and with Dell and Intel with this data confidence fabric, is because they can launch data-based applications independent of thinking about a cryptocurrency. And no one gets that. If your listeners got that distinction, it would change their entire worldview of how they look at blockchain and how they look at the cryptocurrencies as a whole. And I can definitively say that IOTA is one of the only protocols that has that distinction because of what we were talking about, because there's no miners and no stakers, and because there's a DAG-based architecture.
Okay, I like it. And so I kind of want to piggyback off of when you mentioned of course, Dell and Intel. So is that, because there's been a lot of talk, of course, of collaborator and partnership. And so how would you distinguish Dell and IOTA? Would you consider that Dell as a collaborator for the IOTA team, or would you look at that as a partnership?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that distinction is starting to blur anyway. And I'll tell you why, because this is something that most people don't know as well. Like, there's a lot of what people don't know about IOTAs, which I guess is good, right? Because it's so hard to keep track of like all the projects. But we, we're a nonprofit governed by like German law, right? So we're very regulated in that sense. We have to be very careful about what we do, how we operate. Not a lot of other protocols can do that. And the reason that I bring that up is that many of the protocols, this is good for your readers to know, is that a lot of protocols do what's called pay to play. So when they see an announcement, it's like, hey, X protocol has someone building on them. That protocol might have paid that group $1 million to partner with them. So like when we say that we're announcing, we're a working relationship with Dell and Intel, we haven't, I mean, to the best of my knowledge, like we haven't paid them in order for that privilege to say that we're working with them. And a lot of other protocols make that conscious choice to do that. So I think that's kind of like one thing to keep in mind. The second thing, so you just always want to be careful when you hear like partnership in general, I think in this space. The second thing, which I think is really neat, is that IOTA is always been focused on what's called permissionless innovation. So what permissionless innovation is that we've always had an aim to be a standard, like a global standard. That's why we work with a standards body called OMG. 𝗪𝗓𝗧𝗪𝗓, who runs that's on our board. What does that mean? That means that what we're starting to find now is that IOTA is being referenced in patents, right? Like, you Google IOTA on patents and we're starting to be referenced by companies.
Yeah.
People are starting to use IOTA that we don't even know. We've never even interacted with them. So we've actually decoupled from being like this for-profit company that's releasing a blockchain product which we've never been for-profit, but to being an open source technology that anyone can use and is available to anyone. And I think the mistake that a lot of our competitors make is that they come from this very like traditional model of, we're a company, this is a product, we're selling a service. And I don't think that distributed networks can really scale like that to being used around the world in that way. So again, partnership like starts to get a little hazy there, because there might be a group that picks up IOTA that we don't even know, but that might reach out to us and say, hey, do you want to work together, or do you want to partner on this, or do you want to talk about it? So I think we're starting to see that more and more as well.
Okay. And not to stay on it too long, but I'm a big believer in IBM. And so is that kind of the same instance as well with IBM, or is it a little bit different?
That I don't know enough about, so I can't speak to that, unfortunately.
Understood.
Yeah.
And so I got a couple questions, and if, of course, you don't, but try to ask the ones that's not blurring the lines too much, if you know what I mean. And so one of the questions I'm going to ask is, what is IOTA plans for the next 5 years?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's planned for the next 5 years is, not only do we want to focus on IoT, because I really think that is our bread and butter. I'll answer this two ways. We very much want to become synonymous with the machine economy. So when people think machine economy, when they think about devices being used, it's associated with IOTA. And I think that really is our bread and butter. I think the other area, which isn't talked about too much, is that because of our upgrades, we're becoming a general DLT, right? We're becoming a competitor with the biggest players. So I think people are going to start to see a lot of the congestion issues that are happening with Ethereum and a lot of these other platforms, and maybe look at us as a serious alternative, given that we're releasing smart contracts in the next couple months. And we're finally we're finishing kind of the last touches on our final state. So I would say that that's kind of where I see ourselves in 5 years. And again, to reference the last question that I made, or the last point, is that really being a global standard, right? So when people think of IOTA, they'll think of an open protocol that anyone can use, anyone can pick up, and it's going to become synonymous with real world use cases. So, that's really how you scale. So, let's say that you're a small company in Asia and you want to use IOTA. You don't have to call up IOTA and say, hey, I want to use your product. Is that okay? You can just pick it off the shelf, go to GitHub, build an application, and have it running. And I think that's really where we see ourselves as a global open standard. Okay.
Thanks for answering that for us, Dan. And so one question I'm curious about, and this is one of the community, IOTA, when can we expect to be on some of these BeFi apps like Celsius and other apps like that to start earning interest?
Yeah. That's a great question. So again, the biggest roadblock was that signature scheme thing we talked about. So we had a signature scheme that many partners didn't support. So now that we're kind of optimizing the protocol in this next upcoming update, I think that we're going to start to see a lot more use cases. Like, Alex Mashinsky has said so himself. He's looking forward to supporting IOTA. We've spoken with Alex, great team. And they're waiting on Curve, right? So it's kind of like a domino effect. So I would say just kind of watch that space. I'd say the only exciting thing is that we have the Chrysalis documentation already. So if you're a DeFi group that needs a custody solution and you're watching this, you can, or if you need a regulated custody like like Curve, you can start looking. I might be overstepping myself. We have public Chrysalis documentation that you can start looking at and start building on today. Curve isn't quite ready yet, but they're getting there. So that's kind of like, I think we're kind of right before this Cambrian explosion, and I've been saying forever that I think the most exciting thing we have coming up is smart contracts. Soon anyone's going to be able to build you know, a lot of the popular applications that you see out there, like the Uniswaps and the Polka starters and the insurance products. And I think that really is going to kind of elevate our ecosystem. People don't realize that IOTA actually has one of the biggest ecosystems, probably after like Ethereum and maybe Polkadot now. We've got a massive community. We have over 40,000 people in our Discord, right? And up until now, they haven't had a lot of the tooling like smart contracts, so they can, you know, build their own things at the scale that we see some communities in Ethereum doing. So I think that's really, really exciting. And I think I've been crazy busy, so I haven't been too deep in our Discord for a while, but it sounds like people are already starting to, you know, pick up the work that we've done, what we've released with ICP, with our IOTA smart contract protocol. Even though it's very experimental, I think people are already starting to play around with it, seeing how they can, you know, use the tooling and getting comfortable and familiar with the protocol.
Okay.
Does that answer the question? Could I have been a little more specific?
No, I think you did well.
Okay.
And so another question I have for you, Dan, is, I mean, I guess you kind of already answered this. I'm not going to actually ask that. I guess, well, it was kind of how many NDAs have IOTA signed?
Oh God. I mean, I don't know. I don't really sit with our market adoption team, so I don't know that exact number. But if you really want to ask, you could probably go into our Discord and ping Holger and annoy him. He won't tell you, but like tell him Dan said hello. Again, like that might not be the best metric anymore. Like I'm sure we have NDAs with groups. You know, I know of plenty. But again, like I recommend go onto Google and Google like IOTA patents, or that we have like I forget the name of it, but we have a IOTA kind of like ecosystem watcher. You can see a graph like this, like of groups that are referencing IOTA in patents, or research groups that are referencing IOTA's technology in their research. So at a certain point, like traditional business development is incredibly valuable, and then you have to like scale outside. IOTA Archive, thank you Basha. Then you have to scale outside of that. So I don't think NDAs is like the best marker anymore. I would look at kind of our upcoming integrations. I would look at how many times we're referenced in patents. I would look at examples of groups that are using IOTA without IOTA even knowing about it. Like that to me is like more valuable than you know, just an NDA.
Gotcha. And so, and I know you're more on the financial side, but can we expect IOTA to be in any upcoming tech expos?
Oh, yeah, we get invited to them all the time. I don't know. I mean, with everything that's been happening with COVID, I don't know if we have anything scheduled, but yeah, I mean, you know, we really want to make a big push into Asia, and you know, Korea actually was a big fan of IOTA in 2017-18. I think they still are, but I think that's really where we're going to want to spend a lot of time. So Dom and I are figuring out how and when to do like a road show in like Asia or something like that. So that would be really exciting. But I think we want to be targeted because it's hard to be all places at all times. So what I encourage our community to do is, like, you know, if you're in a region and you're one of the only IOTA supporters, or not the only, but like if you're one of the big IOTA champions, you should go and speak on IOTA, right? Or talk with someone in our Discord. You know, I know we have like open source presentations. Like if you feel like you're familiar enough, and I don't exactly know how that process is, you know, please go and talk about IOTA. Before I joined the foundation, I was running the IOTA meetup in New York with Kevin Chen. And I would speak on IOTA, talk about the future of it. So it really, when we say it's like a permissionless ecosystem, anyone should really take it upon themselves to go and share and get excited.
Okay. All right. And so I think that's kind of the main questions people want to ask. Some of the other questions were like price predictions, which I know we can't get into that. And so based off of kind of what we talked about today, Dan, is there anything you would want? So say someone new's coming into IOTA, what would be the simplest way you would probably explain to someone in your terms? Say, IOTA sounds good, but what's the basic foundation of it? What would you tell a newer investor or someone looking to be interested in the IOTA project?
Yeah, so again, IOTA's vision was so ahead of its time that even now in 2021, it's still capturing the imagination of people. Like when new people, like actually, let me pose this back to you, a question. What has you so interested and excited about IOTA? Because I watch your videos and I can hear like a passion. And in this space, you really have to be passionate about something to really understand it. So like what's exciting about IOTA for you?
It was, for me, it was the Tangle and how it was completely different from all the other DLTs, and that how it was completely designed and built for machine to machine economy, human to machines, and the entire Internet of Things. And when you start to understand the use case of blockchain, and you understand the use case of where the world is going as far as different technologies and different industries, I saw IOTA being one of the lead, projects in that space. And that's what led me to, investing in them. And here I am today talking with Dan Simerman. So,
no, I think that's how a lot of people get interested and excited, is that they see how radically different it is. And even people that have, might have brushed us off a couple of years ago, I really encourage them to come back and take a look, because we are not the same. We're not the same organization. We're not the same protocol. Very. We created a post a couple of weeks ago, something along the lines of like a new dawn. Like we really have matured and evolved. So what I like to kind of explain to people is that, like I said earlier, I think that a lot of our competitors are faster horses. And I think that the reasons that, maybe, now be fair, Ethereum has done incredible work, right, for the ecosystem, and so has Bitcoin. You can't argue with that. And I think many of the competitors outside of Ethereum are basically just trying to steal Ethereum's lunch, right? I think they're just trying to like steal liquidity, make something a little different. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we want to play a different game. We want to expand the pie. That's always been our reason for existence. And so really building this bridge between the real world, the Dells, the Intels, the Jaguars, and the DeFi world, like the speculative world, the NFTs, the Uniswaps, like that's really exciting. And I think people don't realize that that's the direction we're going. And to have a group that knows the tech so well and knows the playbook so well, really getting into a space that we haven't done, is really, really exciting. And I don't think the general kind of crypto world has really picked up on the implications of that yet. So just kind of the last point on that is that we kind of look like we're like the others, but when you kind of scratch the surface, very different tech, very different reason for existence. I think many of our competitors are just sort of like seeing how they can speculate really well and then working backwards into like, okay, why should I exist now? Whereas we've kind of always done it the other way around, where it's like, okay, we have a very clear reason for existing. Now let's create, let's offer these more innovative tools like tokenization, like NFTs, like smart contracts, so that we can kind of see what the community, both the IOTA community and the general crypto community does. I think that's what's most exciting for us in the coming weeks.
Yeah. And one last question I forgot to ask is, someone wanted to know is, how is the engagement going in the US?
Yeah, so I don't know if this is public. I think I might have shared this in our Discord, but we've made some incredible progress behind the scenes. And we've really taken on this ethos of like under promising and over delivering, right? We don't want to be crazy. We don't want to like be super hypey. We just want to kind of like do it, show it, you know, and then look at the code yourself. So I think that because we've had so many conversations in North America behind the scenes, like, and things like that take time. I just wanted to be like careful and cautious about what we share. But like, you know, I think the biggest thing was that we made so much progress and really, you know, expanded our network. We, you know, built relationships with people that we traditionally haven't, some really big players. And then the EDDSA thing happened. So we found out that in order to be supported by a lot of the big players in this ecosystem, we had to do this technical upgrade that ended up taking quite a bit of time. So there's a lot of kind of waiting and, you know, seeing what we can do in the meantime. And obviously we've done quite a lot. So now that that is done, I hope that a lot of those conversations that we've been having can finally progress. So again, I think like Curve is a great example. And, you know, people were asking me, did you know about the PayPal acquisition? I actually had no idea before we started working with Curve. So that was kind of like a cool surprise. So I think that kind of, you just kind of see that multiplier effect. It's like, okay, now that we have some stuff like EDDSA, that means we'll be on Curve. It means we'll be on things like Celsius. It means soon we can do things like wrapped IOTA. So wrapping IOTA on Ethereum and creating kind of more opportunities there. So it's all kind of bubbling. And, you know, I know people hate to hear like soon. I know it's like a dead horse at this point, but I really do think that we're just kind of heads down building. That's really what's important to us right now. And yeah, I'm excited to see how like the world reacts. I mean, from your point, from an outsider looking in, like, do you see like we're making a lot of progress? Do you find like, are we doing a good job communicating the work we're doing? Because I've heard really positive things that we're communicating a lot better these days.
Actually, absolutely. I think you're doing a phenomenal job, honestly. There's so much communication out there. You don't have to go far to find information on IOTA. The community is so helping, you know, and I think that's a big thing for adoption as well. It helps people get into the project easier. And then for me, I think if we kind of look at Cardano, how it took so long for them to get other things into motion, like Shelly and things like that. Some people gave up on Cardano, and now we see it starting to take off. And I think that's kind of what's going to happen with IOTA as they continue, because I think there's so many moving pieces with the IOTA project. Of course, it's going to take time if you want to do things right. And so I think that's what's happening with the IOTA project. And I think the people that see the potential and that's watching this stream now are the people that truly see, you know, the potential of IOTA. And I think we will be the ones that see the big reward on the other end.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you know, if do you have like a couple more minutes? Do you have to?
No, we're fine. Go ahead. No.
Yeah,
no. Go ahead.
So like, why do you think Cardano? Like, what did you say? You said Cardano. You feel like people are starting to react like a little negatively toward it. Why do you think that is?
I think sometimes people get impatient. I think that's sometimes one of the biggest things. I would say this. So before Cardano, you know, hit the dollar price target, and they had that big jump and Shelly launched, a lot of people was like, man, Cardano's taking too long to get these other things going. And then they kind of took off a little bit, and now they've kind of been stagnant. And some people was like, well, man, what's going on? And I also think it's a trickle effect of new investors coming into crypto. People are looking for the next big run-up coin or the next big project. So I think it's more of a accumulation of all of that. And so I think when we look at Ethereum, when we look at Cardano, when we look at 𝗖𝗥𝗬𝗣𝗧, when we look at IOTA and other projects that are tackling some of these same use cases, you have investors looking at these things and saying, okay, where can I make the most money the fastest? And I think that's kind of what we're seeing in the space.
Yeah, and I think people forget that, you know, to Cardano's credit, like, it's not easy to build an entirely new system. And I think a lot of new people in the space don't get the distinction between, like, you know, writing a smart contract that's, you know, a copy of another smart contract and releasing it, you know, on a platform in a week, and, you know, doing the work of like the hardcore research IOTA is doing. You know, we put years of research in. We've got one of the largest research groups in the space. We've got 140 people in our nonprofit, right? And most of it's research and development. So there's a lot of thought and work, and like I think managing expectations is the hardest thing to do, and it's never an easy thing, right? You want to make sure people feel comfortable and confident, but you also I could see. I haven't been following too closely, but I could see how Cardano, how people would feel that way.
Yeah, I think IOTA is doing a good job, and also I think if you just look back from 2016, 2017, when they kind of got a little negative backlash from just new things and going through the transition of getting different things implemented for IOTA, and now you can see there's a lot more positive being said about IOTA compared to maybe 3 years ago. So I think right there shows the proof and stamp of approval, and kind of like what you said earlier when you were talking about how some partnerships pay to become a partnership with a certain project, and how Dell and Intel didn't do that. So if they did that kind of on their own initiative, that shows the stamp of approval of these Fortune 500 companies. So right there, I think is a big deal as well.
Yeah, and again, like I'm not a big fan of like calling out, like what is it called, like call out culture or whatever. Like not a huge fan of that, but like I really wish that influencers like yourself would like dig into that a little more, because it happens all the time. Like I hear about it constantly about our competitors, you know, spending $1 million to be working with this or that, and like I never hear anyone talk about it. All I ever hear is the headline. It's like, this project partnered with this to do that. And I'm like, oh, I remember hearing that they paid them money for that. But maybe at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. For me, the most important thing is that it just doesn't scale. At a certain point, like, sure, like a lot of these foundations have like lots of capital they can throw around, but like what happens after you have no more capital and no one wants to build on you anymore? It's like sugar water, right? Like, it's interesting. It tastes good now, but like, once you run out of sugar water, this is a bad analogy. Like once you run out of sugar water, you know, they're not going to be incentivized to build on you anymore. So I think that's super interesting. So maybe one more question for you is, what do you think, you know, because we often talk about IoT, which is really important. You know, we talk about our updates. Like, what do you think we could be incorporating to maybe make our message a little easier to understand?
And when you say understand, do you mean like for newer investors about understanding IOTA, or?
Not even investors, just people. Because I think we, you know, we're so close to the project that we think about, you know, IoT, we think about the machine economy, and sometimes just newer people that are being exposed to blockchain. Like, it's just, these are lots of heady concepts, right? Like you might have to know about economics, you have to know about, you know, consensus algorithms or probability theory. Like, these are all heady things. Like, so I always try and think, okay, like, how do we distill? Like, I always find it fascinating when I hear people talk about Cardano and literally their only distinction is like, oh, it's like the next Ethereum, or it's cheaper than Ethereum. That's literally like that's all they say. And that's all they need to say. Yeah. And people are like, oh, okay, I got it. I'm interested in Ethereum now. And that's kind of like their gateway. So I'm always curious how people are thinking about things like that.
Yeah. I would say maybe, and I think they're already doing a better job about that, but I would say maybe putting the use case understanding out there better about the IoT, because the IoT is the future. And I feel so few people in the world that know what the Internet of Things are, and how machines are going to be talking to each other, exchanging data, exchanging different secure things like that. So I think if there's other ways to, I guess, make it more easier to understand, I guess, for example, what would you say a projection point would be for smart cities for IOTA? Would that be after 2.0, of course, or would that be, you know what I mean? So there's like a lot that IOTA's tackling. So I guess it's like, what comes first? Does this kind of come all together, or it's kind of layer by layer?
Yeah. So maybe like helping visualize what the machine economy actually looks like and how IOTA is embedded in it would be like helpful for people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We have some things like that floating in the past, but we've been kind of focused more on like the technical, like understanding some of these more complex technical concepts. But I'll definitely bring that back to the team, because we've got some of the best designers in the space, and like the work they create is incredible. So I'll definitely let them know that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Any other questions you want to ask me, Dan?
Any questions? No, it's been a pleasure. I think it's so important to explain to new people coming into this space what this stuff is. And I think that it's constantly evolving, right? Like I love, like Plan B has this concept around like, well, it's not his concept necessarily, but like this concept of like narratives, like, right? Like Bitcoin has gone through different phases in its existence, right? At first, people saw it as, just funny money on the internet. Then they saw it as like digital gold. Now they're seeing it as, real kind of like a financial instrument. And I think that if you as a project aren't thinking about how your protocol is evolving, I think that you're a couple steps behind. So, I wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago about thinking through like what is IOTA's next phase. And I think that's kind of the most exciting thing, is really thinking where we fit into this new economy, where the IOTA token fits in, where, mana, and how do we become part of like digital infrastructure, for like as a long-term, part of society. So those are the questions that kind of keep me up at night. And I think sharing those with new people coming in is so important, because I remember coming in a couple of years ago and it just being like the complete wild west. And you just kind of have to like pick and choose at things, and then you kind of like have that moment and it all sort of makes sense. So any opportunity to come on and chat and kind of explain things, even talk about non-IOTA things, like happy to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dan, is there anything you want to say? Where can the people find you? If they want to talk to you, reach out to you, where can the people find you, Dan?
Yeah, so come on Discord. I'm there from time to time. You'll see me like lurking. Like you'll know I'm there. I do like the eyes emoji. It means I'm watching. You could also, like I said, like come find me on Twitter and just, send me a DM, and happy to chat there. What I'm really curious to see is how people in our community, in the crypto community, take what we're doing and then work with it, apply it, build with it, take concepts. If you're a mathematician, take the concepts that we're doing and build on it. If you're a technical, developer, take the architectures that we're providing and create something cool and new. If you're like a trader or an investor, and you have some interesting concepts on like what it means to hold a token, like write about it, share it. I think that's really cool. So one more thing too, just to note, someone asked kind of like how IOTA came to be, and then I'll kick me off. I don't want to stay on.
No, you're fine, man. You're good.
But so not a lot of people realize this, but the IOTA Foundation was provided by was kind of came to life by donations. So the founders didn't get, like a lot of times you see projects do something like, okay, the founders get 2% of the entire token supply, which is a crazy amount, right? Or like early advisors get like a big amount, something like that. IOTA never did that. IOTA was a very fair distribution in that way, a fair launch. So the capital that the IOTA Foundation has really came from donations early on in its existence. 5% of the total supply was actually donated after that initial distribution. So it was kind of like a very organic way, and I think that's why people resonated with it so much.
Okay. And since I guess we're still on here, I guess one thing to kind of answer the question you asked me as well is, with IOTA being so far ahead of innovation, so far ahead of the crowd, I guess some things I've heard is, how does IOTA be relevant right at this point right now, with them being so ahead of things that's happening right now, if that makes sense?
That makes perfect sense. I think you're going to see us become a lot more relevant with, I don't know if you can like share your screen or whatever, but like maybe in another video, you can show the IOTA smart contracts work. So ISCP. I think you're going to see us. I mean, I already think that we're quite relevant now, but I think that let me give you like a great example. So we had a product called Streams, and we did a little bit of work to build out into an Oracle. And so we recently released an IOTA Oracle product, and even just that, right? Because oracles are such a part of the conversation of the general crypto world, that even that in a weird way like made us more relevant to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I think that with IOTA smart contracts, you're going to see a lot more of that. It's really going to be like a multiplier. It's going to have this like multiplying effect on the work that we're doing in the ecosystem. So I think that that's really going to be the bridge between the really corporate enterprise exciting real world use cases and then some of the other stuff, more like crypto centric stuff, and seeing how we bridge them. That's very, very exciting.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't have any more questions for you, Dan. I mean, you're more than say anything you would need to the community before we get out of here.
No, the only thing I'll say is that, we were talking about the books you're reading and you're back. One book that's been coming to mind is like, what is it called? Oh, this is just in my head. Oh, What Technology Wants. I think that another really interesting way, I think Kevin Kelly, a really interesting way to think about these systems, especially as like your readers are looking at different projects to understand. I think people different. I think a really great way to think about them is it's kind of like a species, right, in the animal kingdom, right? And every like when you think of distributed ledgers, like they kind of have their own incentive mechanisms. They want to, they want us to use them just as much as they want to use us.
Absolutely.
So you can kind of think of it in like a global way that Bitcoin and distributed ledger technology and blockchain, like as a whole, is kind of birthing itself into existence using our help by incentivizing us to use it. And I think like when you look 20 years out and look back at this, we're going to be seen as like the early tinkerers that were rewarded because we were willing to experiment with like a new species. And I know it's kind of like heady, but I highly recommend reading that book. And the reason that I bring that up is that I think you can also look at a lot of the different DLTs as their own sort of species, right? They all have their own ethos. They have their own kind of communities with their own ideas about how the world should be. I highly recommend, as you're going and looking at different projects, kind of look at their ethoses, like read their white papers, like look at what their visions for the future are. Like I always, like, I think the two great examples of that are like IOTA and Holochain. Like if you read Holochain, like you see they're so clear about what their vision is for the world. And I think that that's a really great differentiator. And I think it's something that you're, I think it's a really great way for your readers to kind of differentiate between the thousands of different things that they're looking at. Is think like, okay, like what is their reason for existence? Why should they belong kind of in the crypto world? And like, do I resonate with that? So like that's a good book. And then if you have any book recommendations, let me know, because I'm in book hunting mode. And other than that, it was a pleasure.
I'll send you over the one we talked about backstage.
Oh yeah, for sure. And look, happy to chat whenever. If you have any more questions, or if there's any new releases that we have coming up and you ever want to chat, happy to come back on and connect. And yeah, so thank you for inviting me.
Hey, once again, Dan, pleasure. Thanks for coming on, giving me a little bit of your time, and hopefully we can do this again.
Of course.
All right, see you. Thanks for tuning in.